You've heard of climate change and global warming, but before global warming and the so-called climate change, did you know there was such a thing as global cooling?
It's the 1970s, and scientists are saying that we might all freeze to death due to global cooling.
And don't listen to these guys who tell you research has shown. We have found out they've been lying. They've been lying for so long. With this lie about the climate change. It's a hoax. It's a hoax.
Regardless of what name by which this concept has been christened through the decades, the world has now come to know it for what it clearly is, a hoax for defrauding the nations. Without a shadow of doubt, this should be better regarded as the fraud of climate change.
Let's talk about climate change. People are calling it the crisis of our time.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate
Changes.
Climate change. Everywhere you go, they're talking climate change. It's a hoax.
Following the demise of the COVID pandemic, the new weapon for world control being wielded by the globalists is climate change. But how new is this weapon really?
I followed their work several years ago. The climate change. I followed their works years ago and read through their theories. And I was amazed at the ability to come together and put these deceptive thoughts together. It was all a lie.
50 years ago, two scientists by names of George Cochler and Robert Matthews went so far as to write a letter to President Nixon warning of an impending unprecedented cooling that was set to hit hard. Human-induced change to the world's climate, the media promoted the concept of global cooling alarmism with dire threats of a new ice age. Does that sound familiar?
If an ice age is coming, what can we do to stop it? Nuclear energy might be used to loosen polar ice caps. Sea ice could be melted by covering it with black soot to increase the absorption of sunlight.
Fast forward to 50 years later, this same lottery ticket is dealt to the world, but this time labeled as climate change. Man-made pollution is blamed as the cause. Environmental extremists call for everything from outlawing the use of engines, eating red meat grown by independent farmers, to communist-style population controls. It's the same old script, and just like it was a hoax back then, it still is a hoax today.
I remember in the 70s, all the experts, the scientific consensus was that the Earth is cooling, a new ice age is coming, and now they flipped it. People like this hysterical stuff, and one of the big hysterical things is global warming. Or now they've rebranded it in the past few years to climate change.
Hello, I'm John Coleman, and the name of this presentation is There Is No Significant Global Warming. And I'm the guy that is just doggone sure of that. Now, you may think that I'm just a paid-off shill, big oil, or something of that sort. No. They've never given me a nickel. I'm a television weathercaster with 60 years experience, a meteorologist. I have studied the issues of so-called global warming, or now they call it climate change since the warming has stopped. I have studied the issues carefully and completely as a good scientist can and reached an absolute firm conclusion that there is no global warming. The Earth has been traveling for 4.5 billion years. And as best I can tell, it's going to stay just fine for another 4 billion years. But wait a minute. During that period, we have had ice ages, and we have had interglacial periods, and we're going to continue to have those natural variations in climate. But man-made climate change, I'm sure it's not going to happen.
So the hoax is about carbon emission. Oh, there's so much carbon emission. Yes, but you don't have a monopoly on science to be able to tell us that there will be no balance.
My favorite quote to sum this up, the whole climate debate, is There are literally hundreds of factors that influence the climate. Carbon dioxide is not the control knob. The idea that humans can tweak one variable among hundreds of factors, from tilt of the Earth's axis to water vapor to methane to clouds to volcanoes to ocean cycles, etc. One selected factor, the human contribution to CO2, which is microscopic of the whole CO2, natural CO2, and think we can come out and control the climate with that, the scientists called it scientific nonsense.
And a lot of those who are championing the cause don't even know they don't even understand it. They don't even know what it's about.
When I asked Tanya Plibersek, was the Deputy Leader of the Labor Party and the potential Deputy Prime Minister, was carbon dioxide the big issue in relation to climate change? And she said yes. I then said, well, that being the case, what percentage of the atmosphere is made up of carbon dioxide? And she said, I don't know. And I said, hang on, you don't know what percentage of the atmosphere is carbon dioxide, and yet you're prepared to stand the economy on its head to address a problem, the detail of which you don't know. So when I then explained that the percentage of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, Alice, is how much? Alice, how much of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere?
To answer the question, Scott Morrison has said he believes in climate change and that he wants to do something about it.
Alice, how much carbon dioxide is the problem? How much carbon dioxide is there in the atmosphere?
I'm not a scientist. I don't know.
Well, hang on. If you're going to argue the case, you ought to know. It's 0.04%. And of that 0.04%, human beings around the world create 3%. And of that 3%, Australia creates 1.3%. So for the 1.3% of 3% of 0.04%, we then decide to have a national economic suicide.
That's it all summed up right there. Whether it's climate change, vaccines, COVID, all of it. It's all summed up right there. When they're forced to lay out the intellectual reasons, the logical reasons for their activism or for their proposals, it falls flat because they have nothing. First of all, they don't have the basic education and information to begin with. Second of all, the information and education goes against their theories, their motions, their activism. They know when the facts are presented and laid out to reasonable people, it's game over for them. All their lies, all their deception in an attempt to conquer you like a demon, to possess you like a demon in their attempt with their lies and disinformation and deception, they know as soon as their intelligence, as soon as their intellect, as soon as their logic, as soon as their reasoning is called to task, they can't show.
And I'm warning, this is not about carbon emission. It's about trying to have a monopoly on science for another super control. They create a lot of things with films and the film tricks and show people in a room and give them the idea that these things are new and happening to the world, and this world is going to collapse somehow if they don't do something about it. No, they're using this as a pretext to bring in certain control regulations through government agencies.
In the same way that we have taxed cigarettes, we're going to have to tax carbon.
We have to take combustion engine vehicles off the road as rapidly as we can.
Would you support changing the dietary guidelines? Yes. Reduce red meat specifically. Yes, I would.
It's all headed towards the same thing. Control.
They want control over almost every aspect of your life. Now, will we be ordered to stay at home because of the climate? Well, perhaps not. The left is rarely that straightforward. But even without government stay-at-home orders, there are a lot of ways for the left to effectively lock you down, like through gasoline shortages, skyrocketing fuel prices, phase-outs of gas-powered cars, just to name a few. In fact, the IEAE's bucket list of climate controls includes carbon taxes, fuel taxes, limiting air travel, reducing speed limits, phasing out gas-powered cars, and many more.
And they've lied to a lot of young people who are thinking, they've put the fear in them and telling those young people that their future is bleak. And except something is done right now, they're not going to have a future. You're going to live in a very terrible world.
Our generation has been told time and time again that our lives do not matter and we have no historical purpose. We are out here today proving that wrong.
School kids led the charge, walking out of class, demanding world leaders take action to prevent further global warming and climate change.
The events that we've seen over the past week changed the game. We've had those protests here in the streets, children completely brainwashed, just saying what is the exact opposite of the truth. We've had reports of women having abortions, supposedly because of fears of climate change, women not having children. We saw that poor young Greta Thunberg, the distress that she was under there in the UN, all because of lies that are being peddled.
People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
Through falsely concocted data, these climate change alarmists flood the social media space, the mainstream media, and even schools with false claims about an imminent climate crisis.
And everyone is thinking that somehow, maybe there's something true about climate change. It's not true. It's a lie. It's founded on a lie. It's founded on a lie. They created the data. They're lying to you. They created the data.
Now, I think we've really got to take a hold of this as government, and we've got to get out there and get on the front foot and tell the truth, because the truth rebuts every single one of these alarmist lies that they carry on. Every single thing they tell you, from more fires to more deaths to polar bears drowning, when you look at the evidence and the peer-reviewed science, it tells the exact opposite of what's being peddled, in many cases, in the mainstream media.
The Pacific Islands, low-lying Pacific Islands, those atoll islands, places like Vanuatu and Tuvalu, are not drowning under rising seas. Most are in fact increasing in size. Tuvalu by nearly 3%. True or false?
Exactly true. And this is not just something that's made up. This is what the peer-reviewed science says. And not just one published paper. There's at least half a dozen published papers that confirm that fact. And yet we had the UN Secretary General, the Portuguese socialist Guterres, out there parading around doing these photographs with, water up to his waist, telling complete and utter lies about these Pacific Islands drowning.
They're not drowning, and I can't understand why journalists don't call them out.
Global crop yields, pick whatever crop that you would like, and we have seen over the last 40 to 50 years absolutely remarkable increases in crop yields. Whether you pick rice, or you pick wheat, or you pick barley, or you pick cocoa, no matter what you pick, there's been these remarkable increases. And again, you listen to these alarmists and all the crop yields are shrivelling up and everyone's starving.
That's true. The IPCC and others were, and I heard it on the ABC, said many times over the years that we face food shortages as a result of monsoonal failures and all that, related to climate change.
A closer look at the weather changes and signs of so-called climate change, a more sinister and disturbing string of activities introduced into the human environment by acts of geoengineering.
When you talk about geoengineering, my question is, they say that the effort is for tackling climate change. But it doesn't look like it's for tackling climate change, because they've never been able to prove their claims. They just insist that everybody should be afraid of a future that's coming. So I'm saying, is this a way of tackling climate change or effecting climate change? Because to me, it looks like geoengineering is actually effecting climate change.
It's not a conspiracy theory. Geoengineering is very real, and it relates to everything that we've seen happen incrementally over time, whether it be, emergencies such as war, emergencies such as pandemics, and emergencies such as climate change.
The real term that we need to use for this stuff is geoengineering.
That's what we're facing. It's not climate change. It's not global warming. Those have become major cover stories so that you never see the military-industrial intelligence complex's role in running the atmosphere and why and what's behind it. I mean, there have been just outrageous lies at points, but mostly, wouldn't you agree that it's pretty much a deafening silence on geoengineering? What's really behind this program of geoengineering? Because it is about much more than ameliorating climate change. In fact, it's not about ameliorating anything. It's about dumping masses of chemicals, masses of nanoparticles, zapping them with electromagnetism so as to create a very different Earth, a very different nature, and a very different humanity. I mean, that's really what's behind this.
But I have news for them. Climate change is coming. What they're talking about climate change right now is not climate change at all. This one is a hoax. But the real climate change will come. And I will read it to you from the Bible because it's coming. Jesus told us, and great earthquakes shall be in divers places, and famines, and pestilences, and fearful sights, and great signs shall there be from heaven. And that's coming. In the period of time that this will take place, the 7-year period that we call the tribulation period. And Jesus says how it will end. Those 7 years will end with this. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Want to see climate change? This is it. This is the mother of all climate changes.
Let no one in any way deceive you, for that day cannot come without the coming of the apostasy first, and the appearing of the man of sin, the son of perdition. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 3, Weymouth New Testament Version.